أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ورضي الله تعالى عن سادة التابعين وعلماء العاملين وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقالديهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. How are all of you doing? How are you? Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Abdul Bar. That's right. Jahid to Shahid. Allahu mawjud bila makan. Allah exists without a place. And don't let no one fool you. This was the position of not only the well-known and frequently talked about scholars of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah from the so-called Middle East, but it was also the belief and the position of our West African Muslim forefathers. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Fatima. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Hakeem, on these YouTube streets. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sidi Nasir. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my beloved brother Nadim. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Abdullah. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Ahmed. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Maryam. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Demetrius. La shak. Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing like him. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Salim. Abdul Muttaqallam. A long time since I've seen you on these Facebook streets. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Hajj Stacy. So the last few times that we have been together, we have been talking about the Empire of Mali. We talked about the first of their kings to become Muslim. We talked about probably the second most famous of their kings, Sunjata Keita. And today we're going to spend some time talking about probably the most famous of the kings of the Malian Empire, who is the grandson of Sunjata's brother, Abu Bakr. And we're going to talk about, inshallah, Mansa Musa. But I want to introduce this conversation with this quote that I mentioned. I've mentioned it here plenty times, but I mentioned it in my book that I'm revamping. Maybe I'll republish it next year, inshallah. the statement right here. YouTube broke it up. Dr. Yusuf Naim Klai reiterates a question posed to Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, i.e. Malcolm X. There's a book that I think you should all get. Let me find it. This book right here. There you go. Let me move this comment. And no, we don't sell this book, but nevertheless, I think you should get it. The name of the book is The Black Book, The True Political Philosophy of Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. And he says, does anyone know from where the enslaved Africans came from in Africa? Malcolm's answer was yes. The African states as defined today are not the same as they were during the pre-colonial era. There were pre-colonial empires, not nation states. Nation states like we know now, like America or, you know, uh, any country you think of, that's a nation state. Or like modern day, I don't know, Ghana, Gambia, Senegal. These are modern day nation states. Thus, both German and French anthropologists have determined that the vast majority of Africans sent to the US came from areas that were once included in the Ghana, Mali, and Songhai empires of Africa. Now, we're in the middle of talking about the Malian Empire. We didn't talk about the Empire of Ghana, which kind of like preceded that. And the Songhai Empire basically comes a little bit after that. And like I've said before, these empires really like came and one swallowed up the other. And there's so many reasons why these empires are so important for us to know about, to learn, because it directly relates to our situation here, how we got here, and a host of other issues. And so today I've decided to comment because I think he does a good job summing Mansa Musa up and his impact, to read from uh, Beyond Bilal: Black History in Islam by Mustafa Briggs, this book right here. And no, we don't sell this book either. I still recommend that you get it. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Ratik. So let me bring this up. Okay. Let's change that. Oh, nope. Looking for a good format. I like that better. Alhamdulillah. So he mentions in this book, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Farouk and Anthony. He mentions in his book, after mentioning the relation between Sunjata Keita and Mansa Musa. If you have the book, it will be page 87. He says, he mentions, I'll start from where he says, his reign and pilgrimage was described in the previously mentioned Tariqul Fatash. I have that. I have the English of that book. Another book you need to have. Can y'all see this? This book right here that he's mentioned, Tariqul Fatash, and this book, Tariqul Sudan. Again, this English translations of these books. The original language of these books is in Arabic. And if you're not relying on oral histories, on oral narrations, and you want to get the history of these places written, these are the two main go-to books. And so you need to side eye any so-called conscious woke person who claims to talk with authority about the history of Africa and doesn't have access to the Arabic language. Because they try to demonize Islam, and they try to make Islam the property of Arabs. And I talk about this often, how they try to say that Islam was forced upon Africans by Arabs. And that's a complete lie. And if you go back to our first lesson on, which will be lesson number 81, where we're talking about the West African Empire of Mali, and we talked about how Islam entered that kingdom. I think when we talk about the West African Empire of Ghana, that'll drive the point home even more of how Islam entered there. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sakina. So he says, the ruler Kenken Musa was the first of the rulers of the Malian Empire. First of the rulers of Mali to completely politically dominate the kingdom of Songhai. See, all of these places were kingdoms. Like this, before, usually when they talk about empires, usually an empire is made up of many kingdoms. So Songhai as an individual kingdom existed all of this time. But it's not the Songhai that we read about. This come after Songhai Empire. In any case, he was a pious and just ruler, the likes of which had not ever occurred among the kingdoms of the Sudan, meaning Black Africa. He made the pilgrimage to the sacred house of Allah during the beginning of the 8th century of the prophetic Hijrah in great strength and with an extensive gathering of people. His soldiers that accompanied him numbered 60,000 men. This is just the soldier of the caravan making Hajj. When Kenken Musa rode, there marched in front of him 500 servants, each carrying a staff of pure gold, and on their heads 500 mithqals of gold. Subhanallah. It's a lot of karamat that happened on this journey too. See, he's only summarizing here. So many karamat are miracles. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Samira. Maybe if we have time, we'll mention some of them. Even it's recorded the reason why he made his pilgrimage. And the narration states that he did something that he had deep regret for. And so one of the shuyukh told him that he needed to get close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he needs to do that by making Hajj. And usually, when our people make Hajj, we go to Medina first to visit the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Sheikh even recommended to him what day to begin his Hajj on in order to get the barakah from the journey. The extravagance of both his entourage and journey was detailed by Ibn Khaldun when he reported that at each stop he would prepare a feast of rare food and confectionery. His equipment furnishings were carried by 12,000 private servant women wearing gown and brocade and Yemeni silk. Ibn Battuta says in his Rihla, after the ruler Mansa Musa, and we mentioned last week that again his name was Musa. Mansa is a title, and it's like King of Kings. And we mentioned that Sunjata Keto was the first one in this uh, kingdom or empire to assume that name because he conquered and united over 12 other different kingdoms. So the kingdom of Mali existed, but it more or less became an empire during the time of Sunjata Keita. So after the ruler Mansa Musa made the pilgrimage, he disembarked in Alexandria, not Alexandria, Virginia, Alexandria, Egypt. And it was at this stop that a lot of what was known about him became documented. Says he took lodging in the garden which belonged to Sirajuddin ibn Kuwait, one of the preeminent and noble businessmen of the people of Alexandria, in a place called Birakat al-Habash, the pond of the Abyssinians. Now that's one of the terms that are used for blacks, Abyssinians, Ethiopians, just outside of Cairo. And it was in this place that the ruler lodged. We also have another account of Mansa Musa written by Al-Umari, obtaining his information from Abul Hassan Ali ibn Amir Hajib, the Amir of Cairo, who hosted Mansa Musa during his stay, his stay in the city, where he explains that a friendship grew between them, the Amir and Mansa Musa, and this Sultan. Musa told him a great deal about himself and his country and the people of the Sudan who were his neighbors. He described Mansa Musa as a man, listen to this, this is a ruler with all this power, all of this money, pay attention, a man who maintained a uniform attitude and turned towards God. It was as though he was standing before him because of his continual presence in his mind. In other words, he wasn't in a state of ghafla. He was in a state of muraqabah. He was in a state of, he was present. He was hadir. It was like, he was in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, he was a big or a deep Sufi, just to say it another way. And that his Muslim subjects followed the Maliki school of law. And that Mansa Musa was a godly man who was diligent in worship, Quranic study, and devotional exercises. You don't find too many rulers like this. But this is Mansa Musa. But aside from his erudition and piety, what caught the people's attention was Mansa Musa's open-handed generosity, which was attested to by all of his contemporaries. The spending habits of him and his entourage, who always appeared in public dressed in all of their finery. Like, in other words, they didn't come out wearing bonnets and stuff. You know how we do nowadays. Anytime you seen them, they was dipped, as we used to say. I don't know what the word for dipped is now, but back in the day, like, yo, he was dipped. Al Ujrumi, a guide who accompanied Mansa Musa on the pilgrimage, reported that Mansa Musa gave him 200 mithqals of gold for his troubles. And he testified that the emperor was very open-handed towards his fellow pilgrims and the inhabitants of Mecca and Medina, giving away much wealth and alms. Ironically, Mansa Musa's generosity caused such a great quantity of gold to flood into general circulation, and its true value decreased in Egypt, causing a period of long deflation. By the time of Ibn Khaldun's report, some 50 years later, the price of gold had not yet recovered. Even the gold Mansa Musa had brought with him on the pilgrimage could not keep up with his spending habits and magnanimity. Yeah, whatever. You know that word. You see it. He and his entourage spent so much money that they had to take loans to be able to return to Mali, where they assuredly had the means to repay the loans. Ibn Battuta explains, while there he became in need of money, so he borrowed it from Sirajuddin. Thus Sirajuddin dispatched with them to Mali an agent who would claim the money which was owed to him. This agent eventually settled in Mali and did not return to Egypt. And so Sirajuddin came himself, along with his son, to Mali in order to claim the money owed to him. So, just in case you didn't catch it, I said you owe me money, right? And you live a long way from me, so I send someone to go with you to collect the money that you owe me. And the dude I send with you, he don't come back. He just stay and chill there. That's what happened to him. So then he comes with his son. On their arrival at Timbuktu, Abu Ishaq al-Sahili received them hospitably as guests with food, refreshments, and lodgings. It was that same night that Allah decreed that Sirajuddin should die. So he went there to collect his money, and the same night that he get there, he dies. As a result, the people of the city started talking, making accusations that he had been poisoned. You know how people talk. Oh, he came to collect all of this money that he borrowed while he was in Egypt, and now all of a sudden he dies. Ooh, I want, you know, ancient conspiracy theories. As a result, the people of the city started talking, making accusations that he'd been poisoned. However, his son said, I, along with others, ate the same food which he ate. If there was poison in it, then we would have been killed along with him. So his own son is saying, nah, ain't nothing happened to him. He hasn't been poisoned, right? Because we ate the same food. If he was poisoned, then we would have died too. However, his appointed day came to an end at its proper time. The son later reached the country of Mali and took possession of the wealth which was owed to his father, and then left for the lands of Egypt. On returning to Mali, the king sent back to the governor of Cairo 5,000 mithqals of gold as a gift. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I don't remember if I greeted you, Samira. But wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Samira and Fatima. If we try to understand this in contemporary terms, so now the author Mustafa Briggs is trying to tell you how much money that was, right? So that you can understand it. One mithqal is a unit of mass equal to 4.25 grams, and 4.25 grams of gold is worth approximately $243.53 in today's gold market. So 500 mithqals of that 500 mithqals that each of his 500 servants were carrying would be worth $121,765. Remember, we mentioned before how much each of his servants was carrying, right? So each of his servants, the servants, the servants was carrying this amount of money, or $60,882,500 in total. The 200 mithqals he tipped his guide would have been worth $48,706 today. And the 5,000 mithqals of gold that he gifted to the emir after repaying his debts would be $1,217,650. Just giving you some. He's just giving you some con, a contemporary context of what type of money, yeah, this emperor had. Mentioned in the above extract was Abu Ishaq Asahili, who was a Spanish Andalusian poet and scholar. Asahili, who was mentioned earlier as hosting the Egyptian delegate, had accompanied the king back to Mali after his pilgrimage, where he established himself as a scholar, royal confidant, diplomat, and architect. He constructed a palace called Madugu for the king, as well as the famous Grand Mosque of Timbuktu, and lived a comfortable and prosperous life under the patronage of the empire until he passed away. In Tariq Fatash, once again, book, I'll show the English translation of this book again. We also learned that after Kankan Musa returned from the pilgrimage, he placed the kingdom of Songhai under his dominion. See, you see how we kept talking about how these kingdoms eventually outgrew and swallowed up other ones. So you see, before the latter empire, Songhai Empire, you see the kingdom, the smaller kingdom of Songhai, was uh, taken and put under the control of Mansa Musa. On his return, he built a mosque, as was his custom after every conquest, just outside the city of Gao, in which he prayed the Friday prayer. This masjid still exists today. He then took the road to Timbuktu and conquered it as well, becoming the first ruler to successfully conquer the city. He placed a vicegerent there who acted as his representative and built an edifice as the seat of his political authority. It was called Madugu, which meant the seat of authority, and remains a heritage site of great reverence and importance. It has also been recounted. Kankan Musa was the one who built the large minaret of the Grand Mosque of Timbuktu. So you should keep in mind that when you see these pictures of Timbuktu, right, you're looking at some of the work of Mansa Musa. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh billah. Mansa Musa's patronage of the Grand Mosque of Timbuktu, also known as the Sankore Mosque, should be just as significant. In fact, let me see something. Looking for some. The cover of the book, Tariqo, the English translation of Tariqo Sudan. You see, y'all seen this picture of this masjid before, very famous. That's what they look like. Anyway, where was I at? Mansa Musa's patronage of the Grand Mosque of Timbuktu, also known as Sankore Masjid, should be just as significant a point of interest as his wealth. When speaking about the legacy of scholarship and education in the Islamic world and the Islamic Golden Age, we pride ourselves on specific hubs of learning, institutions like Qawariyeen in University in Morocco or Al Azhar University in Egypt, both of which are considered to be some of the oldest universities in the world. However, another famous university that was established by Muslims that is rarely discussed is the Sankore University. It was founded in the masjid rebuilt by Mansa Musa in West Africa in 1327. This university, which started off as an Islamic school or a madrasa inside the masjid, went on to become one of the largest universities in the world at the time, hosting at its height 25,000 students and a library of 700,000 manuscripts, making it the largest library in Africa since the Library of Alexandria, and offering a curriculum consisting not only Islamic subjects but also science, mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and even occult sciences. I think one point here we need to drive home a lot, and this is where he said this university, which started off as an Islamic school or a madrasa inside the masjid. I think one thing that we don't have that we need to revive amongst ourselves is knowing how to build and knowing how to build from scratch. Knowing how to build and knowing how to build from scratch is one of the things I intend to mention tomorrow on the Black Imams Roundtable. But us folks, we have to learn how to build from scratch. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Imani. So this big university that will make sub-Saharan Africa one of the go-to places for Islamic scholarship started out basically as a Quran school inside the masjid. And then it grew and it grew and it grew until it became an all-out university. It grew into become a university that anybody couldn't just go to. It was like the Ivy League of Islamic schools, literally. And I'll mention someone that came later after this time period who is famous. But anyway, recent studies of the library's documents, for example, included the inspection of mathematics texts that were used at the university 600 years ago. When these texts were translated from Arabic into French and sent to Sorbonne University in Paris, they confirmed that the level of mathematics being taught 600 years ago at Sankore is equivalent to the second year of their mathematics degree program. Aside from that, literary criticisms of ancient Greek philosophy detailed medical textbooks explaining how to conduct eye cataract removal operations, and thousands of verses of poetry translated and commented on, not just in Arabic, but in local West African languages using the tradition of Ajami script, the use of Arabic uh, letters to write the West African language, were all found amongst the thousands upon thousands of manuscripts preserved at the Sankore. So they knew how to do eye cataract surgery. A lot of times we think this is just modern stuff that they just figured out how to do. The African Muslims been doing this for a long time. And this information, this knowledge has been hidden from us. This is why this is one of the many reasons why, if you go back to last week's Black Imams Roundtable, we need access to the Arabic language. Because all of this stuff was done in the Arabic language and even translated into local African languages. But you see what he said, it was those African languages was written in the Ajami script, meaning written in Arabic. But when you pronounce the Arabic letters that you're looking at, it's not the Arabic language, it's another language. They call that Ajami. I think all of us should do that. Personally, I think that when enough of us learn Arabic, we should communicate amongst ourselves. We should write English like that. We should write English using Arabic. Because, see, they did the opposite when they colonized the Muslim world. Almost the whole Muslim world was like this, not just Africa. When the Europeans conquered these Muslim lands and they spoke whatever language they spoke, right? Many or most of the Muslim lands, these local languages were written using the Arabic alphabet, which again we said called Ajami. When the Europeans conquered these people, they said, no, you got to write your language using Latin script, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They understood what they were doing. They were cutting us off from our roots. And so now all of these local languages, they're written using Latin script, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Where once upon a time, when Muslims were at their heyday, they were written using Aleph, Ba, Ta, Tha. To further demonstrate the level of education offered there, consider that a scholar from the Hijaz traveled to Mali in order to teach at the university and was told he needed to take 10 years of prerequisite courses at Qawariyeen before he could be admitted into Sankore as a student. So from henceforth, when discussing the centers of learning in the Muslim world, such as Al Azhar, I always have a tongue twister with this. Kairouan, I just say that, and Zaytuna, let us also count Sankore University and many of the other institutions of higher learning established in West Africa. The scholar he's referring to is Abdurrahman Tamimi. Let me find where he's mentioned in Tariq al-Sudan. Give me a second. I should have marked the page. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? And so it is said he's talking about the scholars in Awliya of Timbuktu. And he said, it is said that when the scholars of Sankori came to study with him, Sidi Yahya said to them, O men of Sankori, let the example of Sidi Abdurrahman Tamimi suffice you. When Sultan Musa, the ruler of Mali, returned from pilgrimage, this is we talking about Mansa Musa, this is who he's referring to. Sidi Abdurrahman accompanied him and settled in Timbuktu, which was at the time teeming with Sudanese jurists. When he realized that their knowledge of jurisprudence was superior to his own, he traveled to Fez and studied jurisprudence there. Then he returned and settled in Timbuktu, and he is the ancestor of Qadi Habib. May God Most High have mercy on him. In the year 866 or 1461 to 62, Sidi Yahya died, and shortly afterwards, his friend Sheikh Muhammad uh, died as the other. But this is what he's talking about. Uh, Sheikh Abdurrahman at Tamimi had to go back up north to study to get his weight up, and he was already a scholar, but he had to get his weight up in order to be able to teach at the Sankori University. But alhamdulillah, now where we at? Though Sankori University remains a reminder of a reminder of the Mali Empire's great achievements, it like all empires before it suffered a fall. Mansa Musa, noted as he may be, actually marked the climax of the great state. In fact, Mansa was the fifth emperor of Mali to undertake the pilgrimage to Mecca. His predecessor, Mansa Wali Yari Lincoln, who was the immediate successor of Sunjata Keita, traveled to Mecca, as did Mansa Abu Bakr Beta Mandingbori and Mansa Sakura. Only shortly after his reign and that of his son and successor, Magan Keita, such elaborate displays of power and wealth would become but stories of a glorious past as the empire started to decline and generally gave way to a new superpower. And as we said, that superpower was the uh, Songhai Empire. But continuing, this is important for many reasons. Yeah. So if you're in the book with me, we're on page 115. He said, if we refer back to Umari's account of Mansa Musa's interview with the Emir of Cairo in 1326, he recounts an interesting tale concerning how he succeeded his brother Mansa Abu Bakr to the Malian throne. He states, the ruler who preceded me did not believe that it was impossible to reach the extremity of the ocean that encircles the earth, meaning the Atlantic Ocean, and wanted to reach that end. So he equipped 200 boats full of men and many others full of gold, water, and provisions sufficient enough for several years. Remember that number, 200. He ordered the chief or the admiral not to return until they had reached the extremity of the ocean, or if they had exhausted their provisions in the water. They set out, their absence extended over a long period, and at last only one boat returned. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Isa and Jackie. He then ordered 2,000 boats to be equipped for him and for his men, and 1,000 more for water and provisions. Then he conferred on me the regency. In other words, he turned over his authority during his absence and departed with his men on the ocean trip, never to return nor give a sign of life. So, Mansa Abu Bakr, the one who preceded Mansa Musa, he sent 200 ships out. Only one ship returned. And so he said, nah, he sent 2,000 ships and none of them returned. From this, we can we can gather that in the early 1300s, 2,000 boats full of West African Muslims set across the Atlantic never to return. So the question is, did they reach the other side or not? And if they did, does any evidence of this triumph remain? If they did in fact reach the other side, that would mean that the first Muslims to step foot on the shores of the Americas were in fact free West African Muslims, having done so nearly 200 years before Columbus quote unquote discovery of the Americas. Over the years, many people have conducted research and put forth arguments that the fleet of the fleet of Mansa Abu Bakr had reached the Americas before Columbus, such as Ivan van Sertima, who authored the aptly titled "They Came Before Columbus" in 1976. However, one of the first books written in support of this idea was by Professor Leo Weiner in Harvard University in 1920, who stated in his book Africa and the Discovery of America. I was looking for that book because I had it, because I first started hearing about all of this when I was still incarcerated from Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick. And every time he would mention a book, I would even get that book in prison. And that's one of the books that I got, Leo Weiner's book, Africa and the Discovery of America. And I was just looking for it before the class began, but I couldn't find it. Anyway, the accumulated evidence is overwhelmingly in favor of an introduction of the articles under discussion from Africa by Negro traders decades earlier than 1492. Unfortunately, certain archaeologists insist upon denying all but the archaeological evidence and shower upon an objective investigator a veritable deluge of abuse. There are several loci from which Negro traders spread to the two Americas. If we look at the narrative of the third voyage of Columbus, let me see, I'm getting ahead of y'all. If we look at the narrative of the third voyage of Columbus in 1498, which was written by Bartholomew de las Casas, who was just 15 years old when he joined Columbus on his third voyage of discovery, it states, while describing the island of Santiago, which we now know as Haiti and the Dominican Republic, that he, Columbus, thought to investigate the report of the Indians of this Hispaniola, who said that there had come to Hispaniola from the south and southeast a black people who have the tops of their spears made of a metal which they call guanine, of which he sent samples to the sovereigns to have them assayed. When it was found that of 32 parts, 18 were of gold, 6 of silver, and 8 of copper. It is not a far fetched theory, therefore, to propose that the black people that came from the south and were described by the natives to Columbus were possibly Muslims from the Malian Empire. I don't know if he's going to mention it here, but in Leo Weiner's book, African Discovery America, he mentions that this is the same type of gold that was being used in the Malian Empire. So the gold itself is a proof. Anyway, uh, Bartholomew continued and described that upon meeting the natives of that region, they brought handkerchiefs of cotton, very symmetrically woven and worked in colors like those brought from Guinea and the rivers of Sierra Leone. If you look at this map right here, that's on the screen, you can see that the Malian Empire stretched all the way to the Atlantic Ocean and covers those areas. This extract is particularly interesting as we know that Guinea and Sierra Leone were all inhabited by the same Mandinka speaking people that inhabited Imperial Mali and were under the jurisdiction of the Mali Empire. Not only that, but as Mali is landlocked, it would make sense that the point of departure for the Malian people will be from the coast of Guinea and Sierra Leone. It is also entertaining to note that Columbus is later surprised in the account and remarks that these Indians cannot communicate with West Africans because from Hispaniola to Guinea is a distance of more than 8,000 leagues. I don't know what 8,000 leagues is, or its equivalent to miles. Anyway, and so according to his calculations, there was no reason or no way possible for North Africans to bring goods over and communicate with Native Americans. However, Columbus' calculations are what led him to the Caribbean when he was looking for India in the first place. So clearly, they cannot be relied upon. Also, when I was mentioning this last Saturday at our presentation at the Islamic Center here, uh, somebody asked, and I said that I've seen a documentary or a video because they have done studies where they tried to duplicate the boats that would have been in usage during the time of the Malian Empire and to see if they could possibly make it to the Americas. And they found that the ships could have made it and that they used what is called the trade currents, and which I described uh, on Saturday. You ever have a washing machine that, and you have the washing machine drain into a sink, when that water comes rushing out, how it kind of creates like a whirlpool effect when it goes down the drain. If we were to get the whole quote of uh, Mansa Musa in Umari's report about how he came into power, because all of it wasn't mentioned here, right? He talked about how his predecessor was told that uh, his ship, those first ships that went over, those 200 ships, and the one came back, they described what they saw when they got to a certain point in the Atlantic, like the violent, not violent, but like rough seas. Like once you hit that, you would almost like disappear. And so they turned around. That's why that one ship came back and reported what happened to the other 199 ships. And that's when he uh, prepared 2,000 ships. But anyway, back to this. Well, I left y'all again. Columbus also made reference to the almazar cloth while describing the handkerchiefs he observed amongst the natives. Almazar was a cloth that the more quote unquote Moorish or North African Muslims who ruled over Iberia is Spain and Portugal, for over 700 years, imported from West Africa into Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. Anthony says, so they don't question whether the boats from Europe made it, just the boats from the Malian Empire. Yeah, that's why you can't depend on them cats, because their scholarship is not objective. If it's coming from you, then it's bad. Like I talked about how when uh, Alex Haley did the research for his book Roots, and he did all his research from this side of the Atlantic. In other words, from him going all the way back to Kuta Kente, right? And then when he traveled to Gambia, and that griot gave him the oral history that matched up a lot of what he learned from America and from the archives, matched up with what he had just heard from this griot. And so he built the African side of his family from the oral history he got from that griot. Do you know that after he got famous and the book came out and all that kind of stuff? Do you know academics went behind him and went to Gambia and met with the same griot and dismissed it because the history was oral? Like, oh man, you made this stuff up. This stuff is you can't take this stuff serious. And so this is why it's important that we stick and we become firm on the Deen of Al Islam, because in Islam, even if you look at the preservation of the Quran and the Sunnah, it's not the written word, it's the memorized word, and on top of that, it's the one who's giving it to you. The Isnad, is that person trustworthy? How's his memory? All of these things that go into whether we know hadith is sound or not, or did this person really meet this person in order to be telling this story, right? All of these things, right? So if you use uh, their criteria, you got to dismiss the Quran and the Sunnah too. When they are the ones who, you know, their stuff is, way beyond doubtful. But anyway, not to get off, right? So they're going to always uh, dismiss and downplay and try to contradict what you say because it's coming from you, being a black person and or a Muslim. Because remember, this whole society is based upon the conquering of black African Muslims. That's why we keep always going back to that Pope. What was the name? Alfonso V. We keep going back to him and his papal bull or his royal decree. Uh, representing the Catholic Church to the royalty of the Portuguese throne, or how African Muslims and other uh, Africans should be targeted for slavery. Not only slavery, but everything. Everything that they are and have is ours. Literally. If you go back and read it, what they're saying is we uh, we own them, where they live, the land that they sit on, right? And everything they own, we own it. In other words, what's yours is mine. And he's ordering the king to act on it. And this is the beginning of the slave trade, what they call the transatlantic slave trade or the European slave trade. They don't call it the European slave trade. They call every other slave trade that took place, they name the one who was guilty of doing the trade. But when it comes to their slave trade, they name it after the ocean, the Atlantic slave trade or transatlantic slave trade. It's the European slave trade. Anyway, where was I? As we know from the earlier chapters, there was a long history of trade between North Africa and West Africa. By the time that Columbus was voyaging, the Moors had just been expelled from southern Spain. But many of the relics of their history and their culture were well known to the Spaniards and the Portuguese. Uh, I should add here that Columbus's voyage was financed by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. The spoils of war that they had just taken from the Muslims is what bankrolled Columbus's voyage. All this stuff is connected. Anyway, and so this reference to a cloth that the people of southern Spain used to wear, a cloth they had in common with the people of North and West Africa, is a clear indication of the potential connection between the people encountered by Columbus and West Africa. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to keep reading that. Ferdinand Columbus, the son of Christopher, also wrote his own narrative of the voyages he undertook with his father, and he noted that the natives wore breechcloths of the same design and cloth as the shawls worn by the Moorish women of Granada, and that the people who lived further east of Point Cavenas, as far as Cape Gracio a Dios, are almost black in color. We also have interesting reports from Vasco Nunez de Balboa, a Spanish explorer who crossed the Isthmus of Panama to the Pacific Ocean in 1513 and became the first European to lead an expedition to the Pacific. He settled on the island of Hispaniola. Once again, that's Portugal, and not Portugal, Haiti and Dominican Republic, and founded the settlement of Santa Maria la Antigua del Darien in present day Colombia in 1510, which was the first permanent European settlement on the mainland of the Americas. During his travels in Panama, he claims to have observed black people present in the region. And when he inquired with the natives about their origins, they replied that they did not know, but that they lived in a large settlement nearby and were waging war with them. He described them in detail, stating that they were exceedingly black and a foot and a half taller than the average Native American and of military bearing. Peter Marta de Andria, I'm beating up these names, an Italian historian at the service of Spain during the Age of Exploration, and uh, an author of the first accounts of explorations in Central and South America, added to this point that these blacks must have been shipwrecked long ago from Africa. There are also other commentators like Francisco Lopez de Gomara, a Spanish historian who worked in Seville, we used to say Cadillac Sevilla, and noted for his works in which he described the early 16th century expedition undertaken by Hernan Cortez in the Spanish conquest of the New World. He wrote that these blacks Balboa saw were identical with the blacks we have seen in Guinea. Hernan Cortez himself, the Spanish conquistador, who led an expedition that caused the fall of the Aztec Empire and brought large portions of what is now mainland Mexico under the rule of the King of Castile, described the dress of the natives he encountered by saying, "The clothing which they wear, are like long veils, very curiously worked. The men wear breechcloth around their bodies and large mantles, which are very thin and painted in the style of Moorish draperies." Father Francisco Hermenegildo Tomas Garces, a Spanish Franciscan free, friar, okay, who served as a missionary and explorer in the colonial viceroyalty of New Spain, modern day Mexico, much of the American Southwest, California, Central America, and northern regions of South America, explored much of the southwestern region of America, including present-day Sonora and Baja California in Mexico, and the U.S. states of Arizona and California, and said in 1775 that he ran across a race of black people living beside the Zuni Indians in New Mexico who were not enslaved Africans but had preceded the arrival of the colonialists there. If we take all this into consideration, The hypothesis that West African Muslims traveled to the Americas before Columbus seems more than just conspiracy theory, but rather an intriguing hypothesis characterized by some compelling evidence. Regardless whether African presence in the Western Hemisphere predates the colonial rampage of the so called Age of Discovery or not. One part of Islamic history in the Americas that cannot be denied is the role the transatlantic slave trade played in transporting hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Muslims from West Africa to the New World. And so I read all of that because Mansa Musa connects us to that when he talks about how he came into power. And so, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Kevin, do we have any questions? While I'm waiting for you all to type, if any of you are typing, we have to become experts at this history, especially the Empire of Ghana, the Empire of Mali, the Empire of Songhai. The history we should know most about, first and foremost, is the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should all become experts at that. Number one, we should become experts at the in the biographies of the companions, especially the four rightly guided caliphs. And we should also become experts in how Islam spread in Africa. Is Mansa Musa related to the Bamba family? Are you referring to Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba? In any case, I don't know to answer your question. Were there natives in the Americas before the arrival of Mansa Musa? Remember, Mansa Musa never came to America. It's his predecessor. Uh, it's his predecessor, Mansa Abu Bakr, who we assume made it over in those 2,000 ships that he himself embarked on. Because that's how Mansa Musa came to power. The one who was a Khalifa before him gave up his power to Mansa Musa so he can voyage on those ships. They never returned. Just imagine 2,000 ships of people. This history is deep, man. There's so much stuff being hidden. He says, so who were the Europeans speaking to when they asked who were those black people? They were speaking to the natives. Because you have people here. And for real, many of those natives, I mean, judging from today's standards, if you would see them, you just assume that they were black, for real, for real. The image of that most of us have when we say a Native American or an Indian is not what they normally look like. You know that, right? You know there's a whole bunch of white people masquerading as Indians. In the black conscious community, they call them $5 Indians. Anybody know why they call them $5 Indians? Does anybody know why people in the black or woke conscious community call many of the uh, people that's running around saying that they're Indians? Do they know why they call them that? They brought their false nationality for $5. Exactly, because they was giving out land and stuff at one point to the natives. And so white people would come and pay the one who was doing the recording $5. And then they would record them as Indians. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And they run around to this day, even some of their descendants to this day, running around still pretending to be Indians and getting all the benefits, the what we may call reparations, that uh what we would call reparations that the Indians were supposed to get, right? They right there collecting it too, even on a smaller scale. That's why you have to be real careful about what terminology you allow to be used when it involves you, right? Because like our parents, when I say our, my parents' generation, right? They allowed, when civil rights legislation was passed in the 1960s. No, they used the term minority, and so a lot of benefits that were supposed to pass to black people missed them because of the usage of the term minorities. They say the devil's in the detail. So when you zoom in on who a minority is, it's including not only black folks, but a whole lot of other people, including white women. So a lot of people got uh, affirmative action contracts and monies and all kind of stuff that was supposedly allegedly earmarked for black people, but because the term minority is used and their definition of minority does not include only black folks, almost everybody else benefits except black folks, and these set-asides were intended for them. And so now we're living in the 2.0 version of that. And so now they don't say minority anymore. They say people of color. And so people who suffered from slavery, genocide, Jim Crow, breeding farms, and all that kind of stuff here in this continent or North America have to share the crumbs they brush off the table with people who weren't even here in large numbers when all of that stuff was going on. So people go, oh, black and brown and all this. So everybody else is coming here benefiting, and the ones who these things are really for ain't benefiting. And that rainbow alphabetic community is on top of that. This is why anytime something goes off, they piggyback off of us. So George Floyd gets killed, they create a movement, Black Lives Matter, right? And the people who's all Black Lives Matter, they form an organization, Black Lives Matter. And their agenda is not Black Lives, it's alphabets and rainbows. Well, they're doing it in the name of Black Lives Matter. Shaitan is clever. Yeah, Shaitan is. But Shaitan is only allowed because we sleep. We don't like to do the hard work. We don't like reading the details. We don't like reading. We don't like studying. We only study and read and learn if the benefit is immediate and is tangible right here, right now. If we can't see any immediate benefit in doing something, we don't even care. Even white women are considered part of the minority community. Exactly. A whole lot of organizations do that now. Exactly. So they're benefiting off of black suffering, black genocide. They're benefiting from it. And a lot of the people who are the face of it, they look just like you and me, but they don't care nothing about black people. They care about alphabets and rainbows. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Rashida. Oh, Facebook doing that and YouTube doing, they ain't sending out no notifications. You'll notice a lot of these people that pop up talking about black folks, they literally pop up out of nowhere. You never heard of them. And they pop up and they're the leader of something. And we just sit by just like watching it. Couldn't even do that in the street. Back in the day anyway. Abdul Bar said, where did the natives originate? I know where he's getting at. That's not my area. That's not my area of expertise. I believe many of the different Indians originate from Africa. That's my personal belief, but that's not my area of expertise. I can't speak on that with any authority. You have to go to someone else for that. Kevin said there isn't any black or brown in any actual rainbow. Exactly. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Abdul Rahim. East Asian and Siberia, roughly. I'm not sure what Hakeem is commenting on or what his comment is referring to. So that's the last that we're going to talk about, the empire of Mali. So obviously, this empire of Mali was uh, a very powerful empire during its time, and the the thing that gave one of the things that gave them the ability to get so powerful was all of the gold reserves that was found. I mean, that they had, on their land. Because remember, there's a whole lot of ancient trade routes, and so there's trade happening. It's going all through the empire of Mali, and so they're coming up. We're talking about the Native Americans. Hakeem. Okay. I remember when I first became Muslim and I began reading and getting into the Islamic history. If you wanted to study Islamic history, this is what you had in English. Obviously, the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then when you want to move forward in time, now you're into the period of the rightly guided caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. May Allah be pleased with all of them. And then after that, now you're into the Umayyad dynasty, Bani Umayyah. And then after that, you're into the Abbasid dynasty, Bani Abbas. And then after that, there's a period of turmoil. You hear about the Mamluks and all these different smaller dynasties, and you hear about the continuing of the earlier Umayyad dynasty in Spain, because the Abbasids never got control of that from them. And then you hear about the beginnings of the Ottoman Empire. And then the Ottoman Empire brings you up into our modern period and how it collapsed and was defeated in World War One. So that's the 1920s. Then you get the period of the modern nation state and the Europeans, conquering all of the Muslim lands, and it brings you up to our period. And so back in my day, you're reading all of this history, and there's maps and imagery going along with it. And usually the imagery of the maps of the Muslim world were always colored in green. So even okay, you're reading about Arabia, you're reading about what so-called Middle East and all that stuff, and Turkey and all that kind of stuff. But you see half of Africa green. But okay, if Africa is green, meaning most of it is Muslim, why is nothing here in this book about it? And so you're like, man, you're curious. Like, okay, so you're looking at the book that you're reading, trying to find, okay, you know, uh, Umayyad, Abbasid, Fatimid, Mamluk, Tatars, Mongols, Ottoman. All right, and then you looking, you might get a paragraph or two about Black Africa. You might get something about the Morabi tomb, but that's it. No explanation on how Africa got green, meaning I all these Muslims. Oh, all of North Africa is Muslim. Sub-Saharan Africa is Muslim too. How that happen? And you connect that with the propaganda, the lies that Islam was spread by the sword, and so you might assume that some Arabs came and conquered Black Africans. But as we try to highlight quite frequently, quite the opposite is the case. But you're not going to find that anywhere. This is why it's important that we learn this history. That's why I keep showing you all of these different books, even the ones we don't sell. I'm showing it to you because you need to have it. Because none of these books are telling the complete story. There's, because they're focused. Every book has a different focus. They're not going to give you the complete thing. And you have to understand that with any book, even the Sirah, especially the Sirah. When I teach Sirah, people always ask me, uh, what book should I get to get all the Sirah? Or like all the information you gave me, what book can I find it in? Like all the information I just gave you, probably at least 5 books I just quoted from or summarized for you. You're not going to get it all in one book. Rashida said she's referring to Hakeem. I think he's referring to that the indigenous people came from across Siberia. That's what I've heard before. Oh, okay. Even Dr. Ben became a Muslim before he died. That's right. If you don't know who Dr. Ben is, he was notorious for attacking Muslims. He was he's like one of the quote unquote godfathers of the conscious community in pushing that, the Arabs, Islam enslaved Africans. Ben, how you pronounce his name? Jakahanan, something like that. But even he took Shahada before he died. Many of the so-called conscious woke people hate Muslims and Arabs because of his works. But even he became Muslim. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, we'll be back tomorrow, inshallah. I'm not sure what I'll do tomorrow, but my mind and my heart is leaning towards the Empire of Ghana. Ghana, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all with a good and prosperous and beneficial evening. And I pray to see you tomorrow for our class as well as the Black Imams Roundtable. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.